Hi, everybody. It's good to see you. It's 11 a.m. on Tuesday, December 3rd, and it's great to be with you here. This is Evo Heyning. We're going to be starting the next chapter in this cohort on generative creativity. Um, I am one of those weird insomniacs who works at night, and so I'm going to start with a video that was from a photo that I took in San Francisco of a bunch of Murano glass in a window. And then I let that kind of be the start of my prompts to make something. And this is a work in progress. It's not finished, but I want you to be thinking about these kinds of ideas as you are thinking about your own projects. I'm going to go ahead and jump into the slides after this. You're welcome to talk, by the way, and open up your mics. Hi, everybody. Good to be with you. So this is a couple of hours of experimentation in Luma Dream Machine, then pulled into Canva and using a track I wrote on Suno this summer. So I wanted you to be thinking about what you find works and doesn't work about these media. Maybe it's the choice of using real humans versus being more abstract, or maybe making things that are impossible. Turn down the volume a little bit. There you go. So yeah, this is Luma Dream Machine. I'm going to take you through the prompts in just a little bit because it can be helpful when you're thinking about how to formulate these kinds of things that you haven't seen before. If you're trying to be more creative with your work, or you're thinking about building a world that is maybe not based in the realistic. I wanted to give you some prompts and some ideas that can take you kind of out of your head and get you into your creativity. And this was obviously inspired by my personal love of glass art and glass blowing and glass making, but also shattering those ideas and being unrealistic about them and being surrealistic about them, and thinking about them as potential for political theater or performance, or playing with these ideas in a way that could be useful for some other type of media down the road. So, as we're starting to think about getting into our creative states and our flow states, this is the kind of stuff I like to do late at night. I like to pick a tool that works for me, that I have some credits in, or maybe an unlimited pass to. And then I just create a whole bunch of images, and then I make videos off of those images, and then I put them to music, and I help think about what kind of story that wants to be. So, in this case, I've been really thinking about the plasticity of reality and our psyches and our form, and how we transform throughout our lives. And so, this was a nice way to begin playing with some of those ideas and see if I want to develop them into something else down the road. So, I'm going to go ahead and share to the normal slides and screen, and we're going to talk through some different things today in terms of choosing your tools. Let me get back on video. Hi, y'all. It's good to see you, and we're going to have some open time to share what you're working on and what you've been experimenting with. And I'm going to be asking some questions, so feel free to open up your mics whenever you feel to, and same with getting off or on screen. Feel free to do that as you wish. So some of us have been back channeling about what types of tools you've been experimenting with. I know Jerry mentioned that he's been reading up on the NVIDIA stuff, and there's some really cool things there. Let's see if I can get this going properly. So what we've been talking about over the last few weeks, and I'm just going to reiterate a few things because it's helpful for recording's sake, how to choose the right tools, how to write a prompt that is very clear and appropriate to what you're trying to achieve, and then thinking about the methods. And we're going to talk a little bit more about those prompting methods today, and also about the change and evolution that's happening throughout the field. I've been doing some tests in Luma Dream Machine, as we've talked about, and these are some tests that I did based on prompting for the San Francisco, uh, the city, the skyline of San Francisco at sunset. And I wanted you to see sort of where it breaks, right? So in the first one, the bridges go to nowhere. In the second one, there's a car driving under the bridge, as you're going to see there, right? So, on many of these types of world building or video or image generators, there are significant things that just don't work, right? So, in this case, the bridge is going to nowhere. It's not even appropriate. It's missing major cables, right? You wouldn't be able to use this for something that is particularly realistic. And this is partially a challenge of the choice of tool. What I'm also wanting to point to is that it's also a challenge of point of method. So in this case, I prompted these without a reference image. What I did in the piece you just saw with the glass was I gave it a reference image. And the more reference image that you give, right, the more detail you give it, the more likely a video generator or a 3D generator or a skybox generator is going to give you something close. So let's say you're trying to work from the real world, give it an image of the site that you're working with, site planning based on real imagery. If you're doing something that's fictional, use a piece of art that you've developed in another tool, maybe something that you've composited, or take a photograph in this case, right? So, generally, when I'm prompting things like San Francisco at sunset, it's going to do things that are unrealistic, right? It's going to do things unrealistic with color, with what are the actual buildings that are there. It's also going to make things that just aren't going to work for something that would be appropriate to storytelling. So, as you're thinking about applying your multimodal tools, I want always keeping in mind that we have a wide variety of tools to choose from. The tool in front of you may not be the right tool for the job that you have in front of you. And so you need to be thinking about how you're iterating and testing all of these ideas. And maybe if you're not getting satisfactory results, for example, with that San Francisco example, going back either to reference imagery or to a completely different tool that has a better realistic model, right? Something that's trained on something photorealistic or journalistic versus something that might be dreamier or abstract. So, we're going to talk a little bit more about combining these into workflows. And those workflows form the basis of what we're going to begin discussing today. And we're going to go into more detail. I know some of you have been doing some research on agentic workflows and agents in particular, and how you can potentially bring that together with some of the other things you're doing in 3D world building. So, we're going to dive into a little bit of the workflow process. And as you've seen in some of these images that we've created over the last few weeks, there's a number of problems with existing generative media, right? It's unrealistic in ways that might not be good for world building. Often the geometries don't fit, often the language model might not fit, or it's just trained on information that isn't helpful. And so, how to then build a workflow that you control based on your own systems. We had talked a little bit in one of the previous sessions about Flux, and we talked about comfy UI. We are going to dive into a little bit more around LoRa's, and I would love for you, if you want to screen share around any of these experiments, to come with some of the things that you're experimenting with on Thursday. And we can share those together, and we can take a deep dive, maybe 10, 15 minutes into what you're working on. This is another multimodal tool. We're going to look at a few of them today. Playbook is one for 3D world building that lets you kind of set up a scene and all the different things you want to do. And then AI Studios is another one that you might want to try this week in terms of starting your process of world building, right? So thinking about, are you going to use real reference imagery or your own artwork or some combination? How are you building a world that is reflecting the vision you have, not just, using something that comes from the first generative piece that you got, right? Because generative pieces, this is not the San Francisco city line. San Francisco doesn't go like that. But generative models don't know that, right? So when they're trying to recreate something, they are often getting it wrong. And you have to be able to catch where it just doesn't work for whatever reason. So going back through how you're building your world, we're going to do a little bit of a and this is actually a good time to stop on this. We had talked a little bit last week about a particular world building process that includes every piece and step of the world. Sorry, I'm getting these alerts about raising my hand. The AI sometimes is a little bit too smart. So I wanted to hear from you. What are the kinds of things that you're thinking about working on or building in terms of 3D worlds as you are getting into your own creativity and the kinds of things you want to create next with these tools? Anyone can go. Feel free.
Okay, I can go first. So what I'm working on and what I will be working on is mostly like simulating eco villages and like nature builds, food forests, more of like future visualization for nature regeneration. And a lot of it could be potential like GIS data or photos and videos that are being provided from different sites, like the Kakuma refugee camp in Kenya that I'm working with right now. I want them, it's so much easier to create a common language among like beyond barriers, language barriers, cultural barriers, race barriers, when you can just focus on what the image and vision is and be able to provide visualizations of that united future that we all want to achieve. So if there's any conflicts happening, due to human nature, it's always good to be like, but let us remember what we're all working to co-create together. And I think that these tools are do such a beautiful job at conveying that because of their speed. Everybody's telling me like, "Wow, Patty, it's like you're going so fast," and it actually helps me just be able to multiply the workflow and impact that I'm having globally.
That absolutely makes sense. We've seen colleagues of ours, like Mike Zuckerman, take a Gaussian splat or basically a volumetric scan of a space and then bring it into a 3D world to build a simulation on top of. So that seems like a really great way to kind of bring together what could basically be a mobile capture process that someone can do on an app locally, and then bring that into something that everyone can walk into, right, as avatars and have a conversation around together. So
Wow,
is
that would be mind blowing.
that sounds reasonable, and it sounds somewhat similar to what Jerry and Izzy have been talking about too, right? Do you guys want to share a little bit of what you've been researching or thinking about working on in terms of your own world building and experimentation in 3D?
I'll let Jerry go first.
Can't hear you, Jerry.
Yep, we got no balls. Yeah, I don't know. Sorry, Jerry, we lost you. I'm not sure why the vol didn't work, but we'll figure it out another time. I know that you and I have both been having a conversation about agents and agentic AI. And this is one piece of the puzzle moving forward is thinking about uh, not just creating 3D spaces, but also agents that work within them. Izzy, do you want to speak to some of that too?
Sorry.
Was there anything else you wanted to share in terms of things you've been exploring or creating with?
Yeah, I tried the Flux video editor and made a couple videos, but I've mainly been using the Flux photo generator and then Dolly recently, and I've made a lot of cool photos and stuff.
I think for those of you who are thinking about artistic and abstract works, the tools that I've shown you, like Luma Dream Machine and Runway, are totally fine. Even for some basic storytelling. If you're thinking about building and actually being able to make site plans that can then go to your building and construction workflow, this is, I would say, the path to consider. And I'm also looking at how Gaussian splats and volumetric capture on the mobile phone, which are done in a handful of tools. Luma has one, Polycam has one. But capturing a 3D volumetric of a site can then be fed in and help build that simulation where you have generated objects and basically real world volumetric capture coming together. And that can be brought together with an agentic experience in some form. This is something we're exploring currently at XR Guild, where I'm on the board. This is something we're doing in our Guild Hall and Library, but also this is something I've done with clients now for the last 4 or 5 years. So let's step back just a little bit and talk about what is an agent. So agents build on the reasoning of language models and other generative tools to autonomously solve complex multi-step problems. So you're basically building an assistant with logic that has capacity to do things maybe in your workflow or in your system or in your building or virtual world. So a smart avatar that can answer questions about Solar Punk Futures Patty. This is a potentially an agentic avatar. And NVIDIA has a workflow for mostly realistic avatars. Those can be put on specific guardrails around what kinds of conversations they can have and also what they're trained on. And this is where there's a term you're going to hear a lot called RAG, which is retrieval augmented generation. This is straight from the NVIDIA blog on what is agentic AI that I've got screen shared for you right now. So if you're thinking about how this is built into your system, basically the agent is the customer service bot, the front end, the receiver at the information desk in your experience. So there's also archivists and other agentic applications. We use them for being an archivist within the Virtual Worlds Museum, for example. So the agent in that case will have access to all of the library resources and act like a librarian or an assistant in a library.
And this
So
is all within Agentic where you can create the avatar and then program it with the ethics and train it.
correct. And NVIDIA has a workflow. It's called ACE, I believe, for avatar engagement. And you can do all of the agentic workflow connected to an avatar that can be your presence in. They have their own 3D platform for building that can be ported out called Omniverse. And Omniverse allows for basically 3D simulation building trainings, all different types of the kinds of stuff you're great at. And then Omniverse can be ported out to any number of platforms. So that would be one potential path if you're trying to think about a professional sort of XR application, would be building it within an NVIDIA ecosystem throughout. So there are programs, I believe, to pay for the compute. because NVIDIA has been great at donating compute to nonprofits and to organizations, including students. So if you apply to them, they will give you compute. And that's really what you need to be not paying for at this stage.
Is
So
there like a specific link or site or place that we go to contact them for
I'd
that?
have to find it. They do it also through the government through different grant programs. But I'll have to do a search within their system to see what's possible. I've also, by the way, written to the folks at Luma Dream Machine to see about getting you into their credited program for creators as well. So we'll see about getting you off the waiting list and into being able to do more than a few generations. I think, in terms of your own outreach, find a tool you like the interface for and you like the workflow and path for, and get in contact with them directly. Tell them what you want to do. Tell them if you're aligned with a nonprofit organization or some other, public group, and then help them build that path so that they can donate to you effectively. If they only donate to nonprofits, they'll let you know. So other groups are quite open to like give you like a premier package or here's a bunch of credits to go explore and try something. Because if you're giving them a story and a use case, they'll build a relationship. So not in all cases, but in some cases, certainly it helps to just reach out to them directly. So, when we're talking about methodology, RAG is a key way to build these agents within the NVIDIA ecosystem. There are other prompting methods, and we're going to talk a little bit more about those later. But I wanted you thinking about the different approaches to building agents and how you might bring all of the pieces of your world together, whether it's realistic or if you're trying to do something more playful. And I'm going to take you to a different place if you're trying to do something more playful. Now, this is a tool called Playbook 3D. Playbook 3D allows for you to build your own sort of basic 3D experiences. And it's basically a generative storybooking playground.
I still
So,
want to know what is the NVIDIA video blog page.
oh yeah, sorry. Let me get that. Let me get that URL for you, my dear. Sorry about that. There you go. And I'll do my best to share these to our Notion page as well. I think some of you saw that was set up. So there's a couple of different ways to begin building your world, to build your to build your workflow specifically. And there's a lot of different tools out there. I think you can see some of the different ones I have here that are pretty like diverse, right? We've talked about Hey Gen and some of these other ones. But I wanted to take you through today a process of world building that's thinking about it step by step. This is a presentation from a 3D world builder on how they built a Japanese experience. And I really like what they've done in terms of, let's see if it's going to let me share properly. So what they did was they thought carefully about a in-depth world building experience from every little detail, right? So they thought about the ripples in the water. They thought about what it would take in order for you to feel like you were fully immersed in that experience. This one was built in a tool called Spatial IO. And before we leave today, I'm going to give you a couple of different paths that you can begin thinking about for your own workflows. Spatial IO is one of them. Spatial IO allows for WebXR experiences where you can be with a small group of people and you can import a lot of different types of assets. In this case, they began building a Japanese style onsen in a bamboo forest in Spatial IO. They started with reference images, and this is something that I do sometimes in Notion or Pinterest. And then I might bring one of those images into a image generator, or typically I'll build a montage or some sort of like collage of it first, and then I will start generating based on those ideas. So I typically won't put other people's images into a generator, but I will like build on their ideas and make it all to come together, and then think about generating based on that. So in this case, they're using modular assets and mostly things that they built. They're not going out and buying 3D assets. You can always use a mix of purchased 3D assets and created ones. How original you choose to be is up to you. I know a lot of artists who will work with maybe 50, 60, 70% purchased or free 3D assets and then only build the details that they need to build. So in this case, I wanted you to see sort of what it looks like from the inside. And Spatial has its own system for being able to import. It can import from Unity. In this case, this is what this artist did. So working from the Unity engine and then aligning with those Blender assets, right? And so Izzy, you've been exploring how those Blender assets might come together. This is one example. And then making sure that the light maps work, the lighting works. And so Patty, you can see that this is very much the evolution of what Second Life was, and it's just straight to web. So it's very similar and it provides a great collaborative layer. Spatial really took off during the pandemic as a educational and collaborative space for these experiences to be thriving. So in this case, you can see they really took the time to build out the world, to build out, you know, some of the details. That was at 40% complete, right? So what I liked about this world builder was they took the time to document every step of their puzzle, right? They've got their puffy jacket on their Ready Player Me avatar. Patty, those are the Ready Player Me's. Yeah.
This is, we're seeing the HeyGen screen.
Oh my goodness. Okay, well, that's the problem. I'm so sorry. Let's go back and get you on the right screen. Thank you for letting me know. All right,
Too many
so
screens.
the onsen, are you seeing the onsen properly?
Yes, now we see that.
Okay. So, Patty, this is in spatial.io. Spatial, Engage, framevr.io. These are all web XR world building spaces where you can build a world and then make it available to people. In this case, it's all Blender assets primarily. It's going to feel a little bit like a Second Life world. And what they've done is they've taken those assets and then they've baked in their textures based on those. And so, Izzy, this is the pieces that I wanted to make sure you could see in terms of where your assets might then be laid out and built into a world with lighting and all of those details. I know Patty has done some of this world building stuff before, and Jerry, you're pretty familiar with it as well. But you're really thinking about, for example, how light maps are going to work, how the experience design is going to feel. And then you're thinking about a cohesive experience, a cohesive world that has the feeling all the way through every type of media, right? So the music and the background sounds are going to match. So they're going to start, in this case, building a prototype. And you're going to see it in stages, right? So I think this is at 30% complete, right? It's just sort of blocked out. And at this stage, it kind of looks like a little Second Life starter build. But I wanted you to see these sort of development process layers, right? They've laid it out. They've put the blocks in place. That's at 40%. Here you're going to see again, Ready Player Me avatar, Patty. Got that nice shiny puffy jacket. This is, maybe half done, missing all of its detail, but has the outline. So at this stage, they've started to put in the vegetation. They've got all of those little details, like the lanterns are starting to, really cast unique light. They've got the signage up. Those are the sorts of world building elements that you need to be thinking about if you want it to feel like a really great cohesive experience, right? The seating, the kinds of experience design elements, right? So creating pops based on real references. This is something that Blender is really great at, Izzy. If you're trying to make one or two things that are unique to your place or unique to your experience, build it in Blender and then port it over. And then you just want to really make sure that the light maps and the textures are working in your actual space, right? So in this case, they brought in things that would feel cohesive to a Japanese cultural experience. And then they created things like animations and particle effects, steam, all the sorts of things that you would do in any sort of immersive experience to make it feel more lively, right? So it feels like it's alive. They've added sound effects, background music, and in this case, it's actually, has the vibe. And as a world builder, they put this on Canva to share with other world builders, which I really appreciated. So you can go through and learn from their approach. If this is something that's new to you and you just want to go through someone else's example, this is available. So I'm going to go ahead and make sure I have the URL here.
And the lighting is extraordinary in the simulation. Look at that.
Yeah. Spatial is really great in terms of its capacity, right? So making sure you're really thinking immersively. Sorry, I need to go this way. So, let's go back to that one. Go back one. All right, I went slide 24, 23. Here we go. So Blender, Substance Painter, and then we talked about Blockade Labs already, right? So most of these are tools that you've tried or can get access to relatively easily, or find a substitute if it's not the right tool for you. So world building, I really love this example. I thought it was a really nice cohesive example from a world building point of view of how to bring your elements together and think about the generative and the other created elements all together. How does that fit with the kinds of things you've been thinking about?
Yeah, I'd be interested in hearing a little bit. Maybe it's in their Canva about the creative process. They said you said it was done with a group discussion. It's one of the things that people here have talked about, of having a group discussion with the kapunas, the elders, and an AI to generate this stuff. And I think it's a great idea, but we need to have experience with the tools before we bring them into it. And
absolutely, you have to lay the groundwork. And this was something that in the early days of Second Life we would find, as you have to create a program basically that they can step into and then facilitate, right? And so they are able to be a part of a process that's participatory, reconciliatory. There's lots of different ways to frame that, and maybe a reconciliatory approach is the right way to go, where you are hearing their vision and then allowing those words to inform the process. So figuring out where you create the foundation, the space, and then get out of the way and listen and receive, and then use that, I think is probably, especially because all of you are dealing with communities that are diverse, not necessarily talking well to each other, much less the outside world, right? And they may be sharing different ideals. Their actual visions might differ. And so helping facilitate hearing vision and then turning that into what you're prompting, right? Because that becomes the language that you're using. You want to use their language. And this creates a more solar punk framework, right, Patty? This was one of the things we worked on when I was at Design Science Studio at the Buckminster Fuller Institute, was training some of these early models to be focused on biomimicry and the language of biology and science and nature and how nature grows, so that we could then prompt these words and it would understand, what is a solar punk future. It would have some visionary experience with that. So whether you're thinking about regenerative communities, or you're thinking about how to center different people in the narrative, right? Be very, very specific about the words that you're picking. And if you can use, for example, an indigenous word for something, use that word. It might help you be more specific in what you get out. Some tools like Midjourney recognize many, many languages. So you can, for example, if you're trying to prompt for someone of a specific tribe or nationality, prompt from the language of that tribe. Not always will it work, but in some of the larger models, it will. This is also a good way to help people see their most beneficial and beautiful futures, because that can become a participatory and playful process that you can engage people in and do a little workshop with other people so that they feel a part of that process, right? So it's not done for them or to them, but it's with them, like you're doing it together. Right. So maybe you create this as something that's more like Mad Libs, where the words that you know want to be there, right? Things about perspective and tone and feeling and vibe. Those are things that vision can inform. So I've done this with lots of people just in public, and you can do it on your mobile phone. So it doesn't even have to be super involved. Anyway, obviously, when you're thinking about video generation, this is one of many problematic scenes, right? Izzy, I would love to hear, how did video generation go for you? How did your experiments go?
Pretty like wonky and weird. I think I used
Yeah.
my dream machine too. It was very like scuffed and like weird.
Right. Yeah, it's better for abstract stuff, and it has a hard time with human movement, I think.
Hmm.
And it also had, the bridges. It totally failed on bridges. I was
Yeah, I had
really
to do like
bummed.
London or something, and it was horrible.
Yeah. Well, we have um a few other tools that might be better for trying on experiments on realism. I've had pretty good experience with Runway. Same if you need to do videos that have words transforming, Runway can be really good for that. And I've done that with like motion graphics as well. So um
This is a test of the
you
emergency alert
remember
system.
how it really went wrong on some of these, right? So kerning, font fixes, everything that happens in graphic design that you have to fix. So these are the sorts of things that you really want to be keeping an eye on if you're doing any sort of participatory process. Most generators are going to give you things that are impossible in the wrong ways. Stairs aren't buildable. It can't do architecture. So don't try and make it do realistic architecture, right? Think about building things, and same with your 3D assets. They have to be things that are going to be relatively easy to build. Most of the 3D generators, and we're going to list a few off today. Jerry, you mentioned that you were trying one. Do you want to put the link to the one that you tried as well? But I'm going to leave a few. Masterpiece is one that I've used. Luma has one as well. But trying these sort of 3D generators and seeing where they kind of break, they're not necessarily ready for prime time in most cases. Blender is going to give you much better output in general compared to most of the 3D generators out there. They are often too sort of chunky, blurry in ways that make them not really production ready. You have to spend a lot of time in cleanup, and you would have to go into Blender and do that, or a similar tool anyway. I'm going to reiterate this section because we talked about it a little bit too briefly last week. And these are all of those best practices for effective prompt engineering when you're thinking about forming the prompt, but also iterating, how you build the right layers of inclusion and iteration. And that can also really shape what you're getting out. So we've talked a little bit about being articulate about your desired outcome and being specific in your instructions. If you have a publishing output that you are planning for, put that in your prompt, like die cut sticker, so that it's super clear and it gives you the right borders, the sorts of things that you don't want to have to build in later. You can prompt in early. So, including details or parameters relevant to the task, that can be everything from aspect ratios to the, dialing up or down your chaos. And you're going to find that every tool gives you different parameters. So that's where a little bit of experimentation is necessary. We can talk a little bit more about specific parameters if you like. And on Thursday, feel free to screen share and show me where things are breaking down for you. So, Izzy, if it's finding that you need to go to a different tool and not Dream Machine, figuring out like what your subject is and how the match of the right tool and the right prompting method might get you closer to the action you're looking for. Does that make sense? In some cases, we might be able to switch a tool and have it work much better, but it's sometimes providing a different reference image, like in the San Francisco example, needing to give it a real skyline picture to work with so that it wasn't inventing skyline. Sometimes you have to give it more information in order to get a better response. And even with things like Luma Dream Machine, I do extend every 5 seconds. And so if I'm thinking about a multi-turn interaction or something that's evolving, I might be really thinking about how to evolve it in order to either tell a story or show a transformation. So that's where video and world building have capacities that static images, static images are a starting point for. But as world builders, you're thinking about layers of, 2D, 3D, skybox, agentic, conversational, sound, lighting, all of these things coming together. So I want you thinking about the positive examples of your desired output, but also thinking about the negative things. In most of our prompting tools, you can put a minus and have things omitted from your prompts in terms of like if you don't want text to show up, if you don't want people to show up, if you don't want something in all of your generative output. And this is in most image generators. It's only in some video generators. And honestly, it's a little harder to control some of the video generators right now. Most video generators can do things like motion control or being able to like do things like push in, pull out, being able to sort of pan left and right, those kinds of camera controls. So you need to be thinking about the kinds of examples that you're giving in order to help it be as specific as possible about the kinds of motion you're looking for. And you can also do these kinds of really bizarre little things sometimes in Canva to experiment. So if you are a Canva user, I was just exploring some of the magic tools. So for example, with these stars, just giving it like the word iridescent and psychedelic, what would happen, right? So sometimes you can use the generative tools, not necessarily to do something big, but just to do something small, or just to think about what something might look like if it were in a completely different mode or tone. So these are, if you're thinking about the types of iterations, the fine tuning, often I will have to like generate something like 40 or 50 times until I get exactly what I want. Okay, so I'm going to make sure I look at all of our questions here. Edify 3D, correct. Yeah, Edify is NVIDIA wrote a paper on this a couple of years ago. And they're still sort of releasing what will be the product around Edify, but it's great that way. And Patty, you mentioned Suno and being able to prompt a Suno, and that's something I really love doing. So we can do a whole section on audio and Suno soon. And I'm also down to have you screen share if you want to do some of that on Thursday.
Okay.
It can be really fun. Suno, the new version of Suno is pretty capable. I haven't played with it that much yet. I basically joined Suno for a month, wrote a bunch of songs, and then stopped. And I will probably do that again once more. But I found that they give you so many credits that you don't really need like a membership all the time in order to be effective with some of these tools. Kind of buy in as you need it. So Suno if you have lyrics, especially, you can still publish and make your lyrics published elsewhere and still write songs that way and have them be, relatively publishable within your own name. So that's there are some conversations, and my bandmate and I had some really intense conversations about this with BMI. As a lyricist, I'm registered with BMI, and every writing organization handles AI content differently. Some do not want to certify it as writing. So, your mileage may vary depending on how you choose to publish. Yeah. So back to prompting. We've talked about most of these. You want to keep your prompts concise, focused. You want to balance brevity with providing just enough information. So no extra words. You don't need a lot of propositions. You want to make sure you understand what your particular model is good at. And if it's not the thing you're creating, then move to a different model or a different tool. So this is also true with agentic and LLMs. They all have different tone. They all have sort of what they're trained on and what they're good at. So if you're trying to do something that's very human, you might want to build on Claude. But if Claude is going to be Google, maybe you don't want to work with Google, you want to work with Microsoft, then you would go to Copilot or something like that instead. Some of these are going to be conversations about which tech ecosystem do you feel most comfortable with. You need to evaluate that for you, and you need to understand the security, privacy concerns that go along with that, especially if you're creating a public experience that's trained on your data and information. So there are certainly rights and responsibilities whenever you're creating something, if you're thinking about like a WebXR experience that's published, for example. Hopefully that wouldn't be putting yourself at risk, but you do need to sort of think through your vulnerabilities before you publish. I know that was a lot. Sorry. So you want to make sure you have permission at the end of the day. Consent is a big conversation in our field. If you are working with other people's stuff, please attribute it appropriately. That can be on YouTube, that can be in your credits for your experience for your world or your book, whatever you're publishing. But please, if you are using other people's work, please ask for consent. Not everyone wants to be included in your world. So this is a crew that I work with. I've been building out a series at the Virtual Worlds Museum. I found out we're getting an award in Germany in January for this work. So I'm in Kenzo here as well, Patty. I'm still in Kenzo. And we've now, Julian in the puffy jacket is Sehu as well. Sehu is our agent for the Virtual Worlds Museum that is an embodiment of sort of the best of our culture, and Sehu is our archivist. So I go out as the curator and I meet with world builders and interview them. In this case, it was in an African world that had butterflies. So this is a space called Engage. Engage and Spatial, I would say, are the two worlds on the web that I would say might be very useful for you if you're trying to think about building stakeholder engagement. So Engage and Spatial IO are both relatively accessible. They work for a lot of people. It doesn't have to be in a headset, but it can be in a headset. You're going to find that you have a lot of capacity in these places. FrameVR.io is a company called Frame. They're a third one that we definitely use. And then we use Second Life as well, Patty. And I am going to reach out to Philip to see if he wants to talk about agents in Second Life, because that's something that I know they've been working on in the office in San Francisco. So we will definitely hop over and check out that.
Let's make avatars with Realitycraft.
Remember our avatar last week. So this is the tool, Izzy, I would recommend that you consider trying if you're noticing super wonky details. Minimax or Hailu, I'm going to Luo. I always spell that. Hailu AI. I believe is trained on TikTok data, if I remember. It is a team out of China that built these tools, and it is up a lot better. So we're going to go ahead and stop screen sharing in just a minute because I want to get a few of your questions, and then I want to hear as we're thinking about sort of what's working and not working in these sort of bridges to nowhere kind of clips, right? It just invented new bridges. How do you like that, Jerry? San Francisco has never looked so cool and futuristic.
I love the one that's a mile in the air. Yeah. Like,
I just couldn't stop laughing as I was generating these. I was just like, okay, that bridge goes nowhere. That bridge goes nowhere. Yeah. So some of you have been thinking about working with Gaussian splats and real world data. Is that still something you're considering, Jerry?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
That's it's a whole area of it, given the video assets that we may have, like the Google Streetcar and similar vehicles, as well as all the Lahaina Front Street imagery that already exists.
Got it. So are you putting all of your content together into some sort of like shared content repo, or what are you doing to organize it now?
At this point, I'm just trying to learn the tools and figure out what the process would be before I pull all these other tools. I know where some of them are.
Right.
I know it's really easy to go say, hey, Lahaina Front Street, and you'll get 1,000 videos out of Google and imagery. I know that University of Hawaii Department of Urban and Regional Development has or had a streetcar type of thing, and they drove it through Lahaina a couple months before the fires, and then again a month or so after the fire. So we could have that as footage to start things. But then, as I mentioned in the text, there's also the question of, if I go back to the libraries to say I want some imagery of Lahaina, historic imagery, the old sketches, the old photographs, turn of the century or 200 years ago, can we get permission for those? And that's talking to the Baldwin Museum and convincing them that we're going to respect their stuff and it's not going to get sucked off into AI
Right.
things, all the
So
rights
you
in
basically
that.
need to partner with them in order for them to feel safe about how you're going to use the data.
Right. And it may be that we have to set up a more private trained server for it. And there's a whole lot of those that are coming available for people to train on. And NVIDIA wants to work with people on that. There's other small companies. And it's like, okay, what are the options? Gets too confusing sometimes.
So I think you're seeing my screen right now in Playbook, correct?
Yes, we see Playbook.
So Playbook is a playful way to mock up a scene and maybe test some of your ideas before going into a bigger world builder. It cannot take all different types of things, but it can do some things. It's sort of a 3D canvas. Betaplaybook3d.com is the URL. I used it on a film recently. So some people use it to get their shots for videos and to organize their film projects as well. But you can also use it for mocking up the kinds of things that you might want to do on your world building and bringing it all into something where you can muck about with it. I know you have no shortage of tools to try, but are there any
That's the the thing I'm looking at this point is trying to lay out my options, and part of it is learning the proper prompt crafting, which is a little different for every tool you're going to get to.
Yeah.
And then looking at the different tools that are available, like the playbook, the spatial IO, the all the other ones, uh, giving them a little bit of trial and figuring out what they do in a generic environment, and then trying to figure out which ones we can train for a more Hawaii appropriate environment, which is a whole other area. But maybe showing it in a generic tropical island and the areas that come up with a tropical island would be a starting point. And then we can go to NVIDIA and say, hey guys, we want to make it better. Y'all come out here anyways. Why don't you send some of your people here and we'll vacation together?
I think there are so many tools out there to try right now, and some of them might be quite open to being a partner, especially if they know it's for a cause that they care about or a place that they care about. So this is something where, reach out to their customer service teams if you do find a tool you like, and see if you can build a relationship with them. And then that can sometimes be a better way to build relationships with the museum too, because then you've got both sides saying, we're going to be respectful of your content and your data. We're not going to, use it in a training set just because it happens to be in the repo, that kind of thing, right? You may need to create an AI policy in order to be effective. And that's something where I'll keep giving you those links, both in Notion and elsewhere, on how to build a good, solid AI policy about what you can and cannot use. I think I do have some of those saved for us here in case we need to screen share about that today. But do you have any other questions before I jump into that?
I think for building an AI policy, are you talking about like when approaching potential like tech partners, and if you sell them on this concept, then you can actually write your AI policy into the contract? Wow.
And if you're thinking about partnering with different groups,
Hmm.
they may need to know that they are safe with you. And so building just a one-page document. And I did this week with a tool that's online. It only took a minute. And it really helped in terms of just making it really simple, making it straightforward, so that I could share with someone when they say, what's your AI policy? Well, I don't prompt other people's content without consent. I do use these generative tools in my work. I have chosen not to use this other set of tools. And that's why. Basically, when I go and talk to nonprofits, I need to be able to help them make their own decisions that are right for them. This is one tool that, again, we talked a little bit about needs for storyboarding tools, and one tool that a colleague of mine built called 10 Zebra. This is another storyboarding tool. Very useful if you're thinking about gathering all of your image to video pieces into something that could be brought into a short video. If you like that kind of sort of agency approach, I would say, if you're thinking about creating a commercial or you really want to script it out in a single place, and sort of bring together, different types of variations, Storyboarder might be the kind of tool you're looking for. I don't know that it's right for all of you, but I just wanted to kind of give you some examples of ways like using Notion or using Canva, to bring all of your assets into one place so that you can see them and then start to organize them for your storyboarding or your storytelling.
What's that called? Storyboarders?
Storyboarder.ai. Yeah. And I think they have a sale going on. It's wrapping up soon. There's I have used one other storyboarding tool, as well as using just sort of traditional tools like Miro or Canva. So there's a lot of different ways to sort of accomplish that challenge. Do we have any other questions while we have each other today?
So much to research and play with. I'm so excited. Thank you.
Feel free to bring things on Thursday to share. Yeah.
The slides you had in the background there of and some of the links to tools would be wonderful as my starting points in things again, or the note pages of as I put this thing together.
Let me make sure you have these slides. And I've been putting some of our links over here on the side. And I think you also noticed that I've been building out a Notion page with all of our links as well. So I'm doing my best to keep those organized. I'm going to go ahead and save my chat today so that I can put all of our links into an organized format in Notion. But I'll be sure to make sure you have that in one place. The Canva link here is today's slide. So let me know if you can see that, but that should be giving you access to the slide deck that we've been working from.
Yeah, I have it. Yes. There's
It's
a
great.
video there at least.
It's great seeing you. I'm going to go ahead and stop recording.